granniopteryx, granniopteryx. She knows the truth, she's linking every link.
Hello. I was asked for a more comprehensive rundown on the election results, so I thought I'd go through the business with you and what went wrong from a Labour Party point of view and what went right for everyone else. And here you see an overview of the results. The Reform Party, well, just look at that, up 1,444 council seats. I have to remind you, this is only local elections, local councils. And generally speaking, they are traditionally thought to be a sort of thermometer of how the country sees the ruling party. Well, you can see that they don't see them too well. Labour is down 997 council seats. The Liberal Democrats are up 151. The Conservatives are down by 557. I'm sorry about that because I very much admire Kemi Badenoch. I think she is one of the most honest politicians, her and Rupert Lowe, the most honest politicians in the British political scene right now. I can see a good case for voting reform, although I don't think that Nigel Farage is all that honest. However, whatever his personality is, I think most people believe that he will stick to his word simply because he wants his party not to lose in the same way as the Conservatives lost to Labour after they'd mucked up in the years up to 2024. All right, the Green are up 374, which is far more up than the Liberal Democrats, and Independents up 27. All right, so the first thing I saw on this headline was many Labour MPs are blaming the boss for election body blow. Yeah. And the first words I thought of was that it's rats deserting the sinking ship, really. And I'm using rats deliberately. I've got some notes here. I'm not only referring to the unsettlingly rodential face of Jess Phillips, but she was the one who delivered the death blow to the rape gangs inquiry. And all the backbench MPs sat behind her and didn't say a word. And this is basically what I'm going to be talking about when I've had a look at this article here. It says, there are no shortage of Labour MPs who say it's the Prime Minister himself who was toxic to many voters. You know, as with many socialists, they are completely unaware of themselves and their part in any failure. It's never their fault. It's always somebody else's. With the rape gang thing, for instance, they betrayed, all of them. Jess Phillips stood there in Parliament at the dispatch box and said, oh no, we're not going to have a national inquiry. And all those guys behind her and around her just sat there quietly, and they were the ones who let down all those girls, the victims and their families. What do I have in the way of notes here? Right, what does this article say? There was one issue on the door, that means when the canvassers went round, and it was Keir. If he leads us into a future election, we're dead, one Labour MP told the BBC. You know, when somebody is dead, you know that thing. Yes, of course. That thing, when you're dead, you don't know you're dead. It's the people around you who are suffering in pain and, and in confusion. And it's the same way with stupid. And that's exactly what we've got here. the Labour Party is a zombie now. I was going to say originally, and now I'll say it, that this video is going to be a post-mortem on the elections. But how can you conduct a post-mortem on a zombie that's still walking around? You know, gets in the way a bit when they're moving. But still, he says if he leads them into the next election, they're dead. They are dead already. They could choose anybody they wanted. It wouldn't help because everybody knows it's not just Keir Starmer. It's the whole Labour Party. I'll get to that in a few minutes. Another usually loyal Labour MP in an area that went heavily reform in Thursday's poll told us that the reassuring thing was that the voters didn't really hate Labour, but they did hate Keir. No, mate, they hate Labour. All right, what else do I have in my notes? Oh yeah, here. I'm still of the view that anyone who takes over will inherit the same problem. And then, so this is so typical. A senior Labour figure said, everyone in Wales is saying this is all Starmer's fault. And then this senior Labour figure, male or female, I have no idea, I am still of the view, says this Labour grandee, that anyone who takes over will inherit the same problem. And then, I'm going to assume it's a he, I may be wrong. And then he says this: the same problem is an impatient and almost ungovernable country that wants tax cuts and spending increases on nearly everything. No, that is... I don't know how to put this. Have you just realised, oh, senior Labour MP, that being in government is hard? Has this just suddenly occurred to you? And the other thing is, the typical socialist thing, if it goes wrong, blame the electorate. No, it's you. Now, if you are the government and you are leading and you sit there doing the sums and you present them properly to the people, well, do you want this or do you want that? They will respond properly. But if you don't tell them anything, if you just blame them when you can't deliver what you say you're going to deliver, that's not going to help because they know it's your fault. The problem is you don't know it's your fault. Anyway, let's carry on. That's Andy Burnham there, by the way. What other notes do I have? For example, Business Secretary Peter Kyle said, reversing these results requires a collective effort, not just blaming the boss, isn't it? So there is somebody there that realises that there is some collective responsibility. Which it means there's one or two people with a bit of nous in the Labour Party. Next note. And then Louise Haigh. I have a note here. Here we are. Former Cabinet Minister Louise Haigh told the BBC now was not the time for a messy internal leadership contest and praised Sir Keir's stance on the Iran war. OK, that's her opinion. But her comments had this sting in the tail. The message has been clear from the public, she told the BBC. Unless the government delivers urgent and significant change, it's clear the PM cannot lead us into the next election. So what she's saying is that the problem is they're not going fast enough, hard enough and tough enough on the policies that everybody hates. And she calls that change. What the electorate wants is honesty and good governance and a knowledge that the government isn't being partial to certain ethnic groups. And that's in very short supply with the Labour Party. Now, what other notes do I have here? It's about Andy Burnham. Some members of Labour's National Executive Council have told the BBC they would still be prepared to block his candidacy. You see, for those of you who don't know the British political system, You can't be a prime minister unless you have a seat in parliament, and that's two ways. You can be elected or you can be in the House of Lords. In the House of Lords, it's a bit difficult because there are restrictions on how the Lords can go into Parliament, into the House of Commons in some way. That was after King James tried breaking into the House of Commons. After that, there was a rule made, no aristocrats in there. So it's a bit difficult. As a matter of fact, I seem to remember one Labour member of Parliament, I don't remember who it was, but he was actually a Lord. Well, he wasn't a lord. What happened? He inherited the lordship when, I don't remember what rank it was, but it was fairly high as far as I remember. He inherited that while he was still an MP, and he rejected the inheritance so that he could remain an MP. Otherwise, he would have had to go into the House of Lords, which he didn't want to do. He wanted to be more at the cutting edge. So Andy Burnham was the mayor, or is the mayor of Greater Manchester, but he doesn't have a seat in Parliament. And he wanted to stand in the recent election that was called because the Labour member of Parliament, there was some scandal involved and he had to be ditched. And Burnham wanted to stand for that, and the Labour Party blocked him. So he doesn't have a seat in Parliament, and so he can't take the place of Keir Starmer, which must be very frustrating for him, but probably better for the country, because I've heard his opinions on economics, and they are nursery school level. When he tried to become an MP a few months back, he was barred. Some members of the Labour's National Executive Committee have told the BBC they would still be prepared to block his candidacy. If they do, it's not clear at this stage what the Burnham backers' plan B is. But as anticipated, a number of MPs are now calling to have this barrier removed. One of them told the BBC if Burnham was again blocked, the mood in the Parliamentary Labour Party would be mutinous. Yeah, like they weren't mutinous when the Labour Party were, freezing pensioners and breaking up or threatening to break up family farms. They didn't mutiny over that. But to put a further left idiot in place instead of Starmer, oh yeah, they'd rise up and get more mutinous. Look, let's go back to Keir Starmer, looking worried in this photograph. He is the face of Labour, but behind him are, 180 MPs? I don't know how many there are, quite a lot, much more than in any of the other political parties. And there he is, and they're blaming him. Now, it's true that he is the one he and his cabinet are the ones who have announced the various mistakes and lies that the Labour Party has been pushing in our direction. But do these people actually think that we don't know that they get their authority from all those backbenchers who are backing them up? So what I'm going to go through is all the broken Labour promises and the way they tried to impose laws that weren't on their manifesto. I mean, they give a manifesto just before an election. This is what we're going to do. And then they come up with a whole new set of laws that they didn't mention before. Like the compulsory ID, for instance, which everybody hated. But they tried to spring it on and it didn't quite work. They're still trying, though. And those backbenchers, they're rats deserting the sinking ship now. But they were complicit in all of this. They even enthusiastic about it. Very shortly after they got into power, Starmer's team explicitly promised, we will not increase national insurance on working people. And then that was in June. And then in October, they raised employer national insurance rates. And of course, that hit workers via the wages and the prices. So you know, they said we're not going to do this. And then, they didn't increase national insurance on the workers. They increased it on the businesses. You think the workers aren't in the businesses? Again, just after after they'd been elected, the Labour government stopped the winter fuel payments for pensioners. I just mentioned that. Removing this extra help from millions. The winter death rate rose, but even more, hospital beds already under stress were filled with emergency cases. And of course, even worse, the publicity was terrible. Okay, I got him the name Starmer, Granny Harmer, yeah? But it wasn't just Starmer, because all those backbenchers voted for that reduction in the winter fuel allowance. The next summer, June, they restored the rights of some people to get the winter fuel allowance, but not all. And the next winter there was similar problems, although at somewhat lower level. And then, yes, there was the promised national inquiry into grooming gangs. Labour MPs voted against a statutory national inquiry. They voted against it multiple times in 2024 and in early 2025. I think there were 3 or 4 votes, maybe more. Now, the thing about a statutory inquiry would have compelled witnesses to turn up and testify, because that's a legal thing then. The local inquiries, not only did this remove witness coercion, but it also meant that the inquiries would be conducted by the very authorities that had ignored or perhaps even encouraged the problems or been complicit in the problems in the first place. So they wanted to stop that, and there was Jess Phillips standing in front of Parliament. I did a whole video about it. Hang on, I'm going to put that Jess Phillips national inquiry. I'll put a link to that video about it. Oh gosh, I was annoyed with her for that. So there was some pressure, and from the victims, from the opposition MPs and the press, but not from the backbenchers, again. And the government capitulated and announced the national inquiry. What happened to that? Well, nothing. Several of the survivor witnesses have withdrawn because they say everything in the way it's been set up has been designed to put them off. One of them called it a toxic environment, and they said there was an obvious bias against the racial and religious motivations behind their abuse. So this is the whole reason the Labour Party wanted to squash that, because the Labour Party depends for its votes on the Pakistani Muslim population in a lot of the inner city areas, a lot of those constituencies. They depend on them. So the last thing they wanted is for the witnesses to actually say who had been doing it and why. All right, then there's the 2-child benefit cap. Again, this is linked to the Labour Party's dependence on Pakistani Muslims. The policy itself was introduced in 2017 by the Conservatives, and so you get these benefits if you're below certain income: universal credit, child tax credit, but it used to be for every child. I think it was for every child after the first, but now, but in 2017, the Conservatives made it for the first 2 children. What they didn't want to do was to encourage a lot of poor people to have more children. That was, I'm sure, that was their thinking. So this benefit cap, which only paid out benefits for the first 2 children, it affected the group with the largest families, which are the Bangladeshi and Pakistani Muslims. And as I said, Labour depends on those for votes. It's going to be somewhat less in future years because the Green Party is mopping them up and a few independents. But at the moment, that's the only thing the Labour Party is thinking of. Everyone knows that, including the white working classes who are paying the taxes. Those same taxpayers who have their 1.75 children were obviously delighted when in November 2025, the Labour Party scrapped the two-child benefit cap, which would, of course, benefit mostly Pakistanis and Bangladeshis with their families of far more than 3 children. Okay, and then very shortly after they got into power, again, the Labour Party, I think it was probably in October or November, the government announced a 20% inheritance tax on the worth of farms and combined the farms and their assets, valued at above $1 million. And there isn't a farm that isn't worth above $1 million. I mean, a tractor costs hundreds of £1,000s now. A combine harvester. When the news broke, and in the several months thereafter, older farmers started killing themselves so their families could inherit the farm before the tax came in, which was set for April 2026. I actually tried to look up and find out how many farmers kill themselves and discovered that statistics weren't available, but it wasn't just ones and twos. I kept seeing little articles in the newspapers about yet another farmer who'd had a fatal accident of some sort or another. Do you understand the significance of this? Our government was passing laws which were forcing our countrymen to kill themselves. You see, some of those farms had been in the hands of the same families for 300 or 400 years, and the farmers were faced with the knowledge that after their death, the land in which they and their ancestors had invested so much and had been through such difficulties and disappointments and triumphs as well, they'd have to be sold and chopped up for housing estates to pay government taxes. Just one Labour politician voted against this new tax. What was his name? Oh yeah, Marcus Campbell Savers, an MP for Penrith and Solway. And he was a man of principle, much to be admired. Regrettably, he is unusual among the Labour backbenchers. There were between 30 and 80 Labour MPs supposed to be representing agricultural areas because the Labour Party had said, no, we're not putting inheritance tax so you can vote for us. Yeah? Between 30 and 80 Labour MPs. And the best that some of them did, abstained at the vote. So that allowed it to go through. But they were completely absolved of responsibility. Some actually voted for the new tax. And I do hope their constituents remember this when the general election comes up. But all of them, the voters and the abstainers, except for Marcus Thingy, whatever his name was, were like most MPs nowadays in Parliament to support their party when in fact they are supposed to represent their constituents. But not these guys. In the end, it was the farmers themselves who changed the laws because they kept turning up in London in their tractors. And I'm sure they had better things to do, like producing food, for instance. But in December, or just gone, the threshold was raised to 2.5 million. It sort of shows the government hadn't a clue about this whole situation. They just didn't have a clue. Oh, and then there's the VAT on education, isn't there? Same thing. And what's happened? A lot of parents who were struggling. I mean, it's not like a lot of posh people. The posh people could stump up for the extra 20% VAT, but not the ones who were struggling, who had to fall back on an overcrowded state system that then had to deal with a lot of children that came out of schools, small independent schools, that had to close down. It was chaos, and a lot of children's lives will have been ruined by that. Again, this government, and the backbenchers, not a word. And these farmers here, they had to do the work of dealing with this ridiculous, horrible, cruel, vicious law themselves. Absolutely no help from their supposed representatives, those MP rats who sat there on the back benches nibbling their chunks of cheese that those farmers were providing for them. Okay, and then around August 2024, so a couple of months after they got into power, they saw the impossible sums, the welfare bills, and that they're completely unsustainable. And Labour tried to introduce reforms and disability benefit cuts because this whole sector is acknowledged even now to be unsustainably bloated. And they tried to push it through, and by next year, the summer of next year, they pulled back on that because of a backbench revolt. Why did the backbench revolt happen over welfare cuts and not over the rape gang inquiry? Well, that's a rhetorical question because you know the answer and so do I. Why did they not revolt over the pensioners' winter heating allowance and the farm inheritance tax that was killing their constituents? The answer is voters. The backbenchers saw welfare recipients as their major voting base, and welfare recipients include a higher than national average proportion of people from Pakistani and Bangladeshi heritage, and whether Pakistani or ethnic British, they all tend to live in concentrated areas, inner cities and council estates. Whereas the victim of rape gangs, the farmers and the pensioners, they're all scattered communities that, electorally speaking, don't matter too much. And I'm bringing this up only to prove that when those backbenchers want to do something, when their personal bits of cheese are threatened, they certainly can get together and make changes. So there are no excuses really, are there? But no, they start blaming Starmer for everything. But just to finish off, I would remind you that the numbers from these local elections, which were so disastrous to the Labour Party, were elections that Starmer, with the enthusiastic compliance, of course, from his backbenchers, remember the ones who are now blaming him for everything, with their compliance, Starmer tried to stop most of these elections because he knew and they knew what was going to happen. They knew how unpopular they were. The excuse was that there were going to be boundary changes in a couple of years, and so a vote now would be a waste of public money, as if they worried that much about public money being wasted. That idea was ditched in this February after Nigel Farage threatened to sue. They knew they were on legally very shaky ground, and they capitulated. Now, look, there were other commitments they made before the election. I've got a whole list in my head here. The commitments they made and then ditched straight afterwards as soon as they got in. But, you know, I can't go into everything. I think I've been talking really for quite a long time. And yes, Starmer was the face of all of this. But what kept that face there was the backbenchers who voted with every twist and turn. And now they're blaming him. No, it's them. They gave him the backing. They didn't so much as raise an eyebrow at obviously damaging policies. And they're worried about being dead in the next election. Yeah, well, they deserve it. They were just voting fodder. And they didn't mind, just so long as all those chunks of cheese kept rolling in. I keep talking about rats, remember. And now they're blaming Starmer. Oh, yes, get rid of him and everybody will love us again. Yeah, of course they will. Just like everyone loves a rat. All right, well, that's it. Till next time. You can help my channel by subscribing and clicking the notification bell. That's quite important. And by sharing if you're so inclined. Links to my other channels and to donation methods are in the description. But the best way you can help is simply by clicking like and notify. Thank you.